Hi, NGLI. My name's Adam, and I am the pastor of St. John's UCC in Dayton, Ohio. And so I would just like to take a few minutes and introduce myself to you and answer the questions that you have asked me to walk through. And I'm going to try and be very as brief as possible, succinct as possible, because I imagine you have quite a few of these that you need to go through, and you probably aren't really going to be very appreciative of overly long and windy answers, which is really kind of a challenge as a pastor, but hey, we're going to get there. Anyways, just to dive right in, to answer your questions of describing my sense of call to ministry, the parish, and the United Church of Christ, well, I think I'd best describe my call story as one of personal surprise at divine intention. I don't think I ever wanted to be in parish ministry, so to speak. I mean, I've always felt a love and a call to study the Bible and to serve God's church in some way, shape, or form, but parish ministry, at least for a large portion of my life, appealed to me about as much as an appendectomy without any anesthesia or something of the sort. A little background. I grew up in a tradition outside of the UCC where the minister was always on a pedestal. There were things that you could say, couldn't say, should do, shouldn't do, and you were always watched, judged, evaluated, and critiqued. And I had about zero interest in that. I always had a great love for the church again, and I definitely felt a call to do something for God's kingdom, something with the Bible specifically. But um, I really had no desire to be in parish ministry for a long time. And even when I found my way to the UCC and got to see that, well, not all pastors were held on the same expectation level or sat on the same pedestal, I was still pretty leery about this parish thing. All the same, God, in quiet God ways, continually and frequently kept preparing me for parish ministry with life decisions, situations, and other instances that I can only now look back on and go, oh, okay, so that's why that was happening. So, well, I was in seminary actually, and I wound up in seminary pursuing an academic track of study. Uh, for reasons I'm not sure I can still explain, God laid it upon my heart to pursue ordination in the UCC. Again, I really wasn't sure why I wanted to, but I really felt a calling to that. And at first, I really said that, well, maybe it's because I view academic teaching as a ministry for the church, and I feel like I should be ordained as part of that. Um, Thankfully, I had a very, very kind discernment committee who really asked me hard questions, but also empathized with me and were very supportive, but also very motivational. They definitely, and they were also very understanding, particularly when I would swear up, down, and sideways that no, 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 I have no interest in going into the parish. It's no big deal. Local congregations are not my thing. And they would just laugh. Because apparently it wasn't just me that God was talking to at that point. They were hearing some things too. Um, but, anyways, clearly, making a very long story short, all the preparation that I had received, whether it was academic training, whether it was life experience and leadership of people, and a few other things, well, all that preparation came to bear during my doctoral studies in Aberdeen, Scotland. Um, I am just now finishing my PhD from the University of Aberdeen in church history, and I thought acceptance into one of the ancient English speaking universities and having high grade doctoral advisors was great validation for my concept of my call to teaching in the academic and seminary setting as a ministry. And then, once again, by a process that I can only really attribute to God, because I still don't understand how this happened, I started serving as an associate minister in a local parish, and I loved it. I realized that my training, though it was largely academic, was supplemented by life experiences, and I really, really, as part of that, enjoyed this ministry thing. I enjoyed serving and caring for folks. Moreover, I realized that teaching didn't just occur in a seminary. In fact, I was doing, before long, more in depth teaching in this parish than I ever was doing for the classes that I was TAing at the time. So by the end of my doctoral career now, I can say that teaching for the service of the church at the seminary level is certainly part of my call, just like I said it was years ago. But it exists co-equal with serving and teaching at the local level and in the local parish for all of God's people. In its own way, my study of church history has led me to understand that this isn't some new concept. Often the giants of our faith have been both strong academics and dedicated local ministers. And realizing this has really helped me to morph into something of an academic pastoral hybrid, with a foot in both worlds, working integratively to strengthen God's church with sound teaching while bringing real world considerations to academic pursuits. And so I think in sum, I've realized that neither one of these arenas, pursued separately, will ever bring about the reality we pray for when we say, Christ's kingdom come, Christ's will be done. Instead, they both have to be integrated in a way that incorporates hand, heart, and mind, so that we might really live on earth as we would in heaven. But as for why the United Church of Christ, I mean, why not? In all seriousness, I do feel a great love for the UCC. And that's a big statement for me. I have been a wanderer at parts of my life, and I've spent time with a number of denominations over the years. I was raised Baptist, shared a number of years with the Lutherans, went to a Methodist seminary, served a Church of Scotland parish, and even had a wee dabble in Roman Catholicism. All of that allowed me to see what church looks like in a number of different arenas. And while all of these traditions have their strengths, they also tend to have their weaknesses as well, particularly that they get rather parochial very quickly. And this is a problem. Such parochial thoughts tend to really boundary the kingdom of God in ways which are not really helpful to a world that is integrative and cooperational. And quite frankly, they're also just really not Christ-like. So the UCC, well, it's obviously not a perfect denomination, but I think it's our core motto that they might all be one, which continually and constantly draws me back to this church, makes me feel dedicated to it, because it is what Christ's mission philosophy is all about. Moreover, our popular, no matter who you are or where you are, is probably the most succinct summation of the gospel philosophy that has been put forward in recent years. And most definitely our current and new focus upon what I would call renewal and re-engagement of our church with society through the Be the Church campaign is really something that is both inspiring and necessary. I guess in sum, I feel pretty darn lucky to be part of the UCC in this time and place. And I feel pretty darn lucky to be finding ways to bridge the academic and pastoral worlds and bring a little bit of both into each realm. Because I feel like it's only going to be with an integrative approach that really uses all three of these criteria, that uses all three of these considerations, that we really might actually see Christ's kingdom come. So answering your next question, what is your personal vision, mission, purpose statement for your life? I think my personal vision statement for life is to be whatever for the least of these. Kind of like when Christ said, whatever you have done for the least of these. I think whatever I can be for the least of these is what is most important and really is a place that my call really brings me to. And to do this requires, I'd say, three different things. It requires me to be hands and feet, This is obviously a doing vision statement. It's not one that can be lived out in an office chair, even though I do kind of like the one that I have right now. It also requires a continual process of learning to listen for God. And often that leads to learning how to cut my own voice and its wants and needs out of the process. And finally, it requires me to sit with others, to meet them where they are, and to gain an understanding of how and why they see themselves in one way or another. Which really actually leads into your next question, which is, what is one of the things you are passionate about in the congregation that you're currently serving? The congregation I serve, St. John's, are awesome. They're completely crazy, which is why I guess I fit in here, because if you haven't been able to tell by now, I'm a little different. Anyways, St. John's is an urban parish that has been historically white, historically suburban, and historically heterosexual for most of its existence. And it's having to learn to be anything but those things at this point in time if it wants to survive. I was called here as an instrument of change, which is both terrifying and wonderful in its own way. The congregation when I got here was down to about 35 people on a Sunday morning, which when you have a sanctuary that seats about 900, it's really, really not a good thing. And they were doing the whole death by endowment scheme, I guess you would say, where it's like, hey, we got money, let's spend it. Obviously, there were a lot of people who said, we can't continue to do it like this. We love this church. We love God's church. We want to see something happen here. So let's try and be that something. And I was called to help direct that. And that has been really cool. And it's taken off in weird and strange ways that I never would have anticipated, but I can't say that I'm really unhappy with. One of the biggest things that we're doing right now that I am just incredibly thrilled with and has been so beneficial both for ourselves and the wider community has been partnering with bars for mission projects. Dayton has a huge craft brewing scene, particularly right around where we are located. We have a brew pub and then a brewery right next door to us. And then if you go about a block over, we've got 3 or 4 more. And if you go another block over, you see where we're going with this. I actually, a little background info, bartended to put myself through seminary. So I've got a good rapport with the bar industry and also with those who work in it. I can empathize quite a bit with them. So when I got here, I said, well, let's connect with the local community. And I also enjoy a good beer. So I definitely made rounds and got to know people, and we had in my first couple of months, we had a food drive project coming up where the congregation was going to bring in food for a local food pantry, and I just said, well, let's see if we can't get other people to do this. So I whipped up some really cheesy looking boxes and just popped by a few of my favorite bars and said, hey, do you think you guys might be able to help us with this and see if your patrons would want to bring in, canned goods or whatever have you? We can't offer any prizes or anything, but, it would be a great way to increase your foot traffic in your business, and maybe if you advertise it. And, it also it's for a great cause. And we had about half dozen who said, yeah, let's do it. And they raised almost a ton of food, like literally. One of the bars pulled up with a van full of food, like stacked to the ceiling food. It was kind of cool. But what was more cool than that is these same bars then just said, so what are we doing next? And we started to realize they want to do things with us. We have a community that wants to give, that wants to support, that wants to love, that wants to care. And yeah, it's the bar community, which you don't really think about with a church usually, but hey, if God is weird enough to talk to somebody through a burning bush, I feel like God is weird enough to talk to somebody through, a flaming shot. I'll take it. So yeah, we are the church that does mission projects with bars. And because of that, we are starting to get lots of people who show up with us. We're starting to get a lot of people who have helped out at the bars by bringing in canned goods or whatever have you, or bringing in socks, or bringing in clothing, or bringing in. We just did a project with beer tabs and pop tabs for Ronald McDonald House, and they're starting to come. And we are now sitting around 70 people on a Sunday morning, which is still really not the greatest with the size of our space, but hey, that's a pretty darn awesome thing. And these are people who, it's kind of awesome when I get to do pastoral care for them because inevitably they want to meet at the bar. Wins. But they, we're meeting them where they are, they're meeting us where we are. And because we're all willing to do that together, we're really getting to see something amazing happen right now. Which that actually leads into the next question. This is kind of funny how these are flowing together. But when you've asked that I choose one biblical text and describe how it influenced and shapes my ministry, well, I think I would have to go with the Pauline scripture of I have become all things to all men, so that I may by all means save some. That really is I think, in a lot of ways, that is the minister's prayer, or at least the best advice you're ever going to get as a minister, because you have to be able to be an empathetic person who sits with older people who are nearing death and dying, but you also have to be a person who can sit in a bar with the guy who's making some very poor life choices and just be a listening ear. You have to be able to sit with the woman who's, just terminated her pregnancy and is asking you, did I do a bad thing? Is God mad at me? You have to learn to be all these things for these people. You have to learn to be grace. You have to learn to be love. You have to learn to be peace and joy, and to meet them wherever they are. Whether it's a bar, whether it's a bus stand, whether it's a hospital, whatever have you. Because that's the only way the gospel really gets out. And your next question of describe the most pressing challenges facing Christian congregations today. My church council president just showed up right as I'm filming this, of course. So awesome. Anyways, I think the most pressing question would be a question of relevancy. This is something I saw particularly while serving in Europe. Europe, as they say, is socially a bit ahead of us, maybe about 10 years or so, it seems. And in some cases, maybe a little bit more. The church in the European realm is incredibly irrelevant. It has wonderful thinkers, wonderful, wonderful theologians, has no connection to reality, no connection to society. I mean, in some ways it does, but vastly, by and large, nothing. We very much face the thought that we could be that in that same place in the next 10 years as we move towards more of a social style and setting that we see in Europe right now. The question is going to become, why is your church worthy of me getting up on a Sunday morning and coming in here? Why is it worth my efforts to do these things, with the church? Why is it worth me giving money to keep the church open and the lights on? And because we've always done it is just not a good enough answer anymore. So I think the biggest pressing challenge we have is something of relevancy. And then finally, how do I anticipate NGLI to equip and strengthen my ministry? I think there's a lot of ways. I'm really excited, perhaps, to sit down and really work through family systems theories. I had a really small dose of that in seminary, and I think it would just be incredibly helpful to go through that. Moreover, to really sit down and delve into pastoral theology a bit more. Being a church historian and doing that in the PhD track, I have a great systematic and historical theological understanding. I can walk you through umpteen million styles and thoughts and concepts of doctrine. But I don't necessarily know that I am the greatest when it comes to sitting and listening, and I don't necessarily know that I have some of the skills and techniques that I would like to have. And so I think in GLI, by the way it's structured and the way it's set up with some of the emphasis and projects that I've seen in your information, I think that will be really, really helpful to my ministry. What do I bring to the cohort of colleagues potentially? Um, as I've alluded to a little bit here, I have a really big academic background, so that does help. I'm a walking, talking theological dictionary in a lot of ways, which can be really awkward. It's not exactly the party gift you want, but hey, it's great. At the same point in time, I have a large history of work in restaurants, bars, etc., and particularly in management. So I have a lot of experience in leading people, which I feel like I can definitely help and share with my cohort if I have a cohort. Um, and then finally, I'm a lot of fun. I think I laugh, I joke. I'm pretty hard to knock off balance, so to speak. But anyways, I do thank you for your consideration and do look forward to hearing your decisions. So thank you very much. Bye bye.